The unintended victim of an attack authorised by President Putin himself, 44-year-old Dawn Sturgess, a mother of three from Salisbury, was, an inquiry found today, caught in the crosshairs of a public demonstration of Russian power, killed by the nerve agent destined instead for a former Russian spy. The 3-year inquiry into whether more should have been done to prevent her death has found the Novichok levels in her system were so high that her condition was unsurvivable even before the ambulance arrived.
Those who authorized the mission, up to and including, as I found, President Putin, that conduct was astonishingly reckless. There is a direct causal link between the actions of all those individuals and Dawn Sturgess's death. And they, and only they, bear moral responsibility.
Those words will have been difficult hearing for Dawn's family, who've always insisted that security services in the UK should have been more vigilant, that the public should have been warned not to pick anything up, that the poisoning symptoms should have been more widely known. Today, a statement was read out on their behalf.
Our heartfelt aim throughout the long process has been to do right by our daughter, mother and sister Dawn. In the immediate aftermath of her death, Wiltshire police wrongly characterised Dawn as a drug user, and the public were wrongly led to believe that she had somehow contributed to her death. As the evidence at the inquiry recognised, that was a grave mistake by Wiltshire police.
Wiltshire police apologised, saying this never should have happened. The attack was intended for Sergei Skripal, a former Russian spy who'd come to the UK as part of a prisoner swap in 2010 and whose daughter was visiting from Russia. Her emails had been hacked by the GRU. And it was 3 GRU men who travelled to the UK to try to kill her father 8 years later under aliases. They were, in reality, Alexander Mishkin, Anatoly Chapiga and Denis Sergeyev, who stayed in London while the other 2 travelled to Salisbury, smearing Novichok on Skripal's door handle. The pair then discarded the perfume bottle containing it before travelling back to Russia.
We're talking about something called Novichok, the most deadly chemical ever manufactured by man. And if you think that something like chlorine is maybe toxicity 1, this is toxicity 10,000. Although there was only about half an egg cup or less of Novichok, we think here in Salisbury, actually it could have killed thousands, if not tens of thousands of people.
The bottle was later picked up by Dawn's boyfriend. He can't remember where. He gave it to her as a present more than 3 months later, and she sprayed it directly onto her wrists. Rushed to hospital, she died 8 days later. After the CPS named Mishkin and Chapiga, captured on CCTV multiple times walking to Skripal's home, they claimed on Russian state-controlled television they were simply there as tourists.
It's a tourist city. They have a famous cathedral there.
But the inquiry heard extensive evidence that they were state operatives. Anatoly Chapiga even seen here at the wedding of a daughter of a top GRU commander. Today, the organisation and 11 of its operatives were sanctioned by the UK government.
It's a message to British companies and organisations that operate across the world that they should have no dealings with the GRU or with any of these individuals who we bring out of the shadows. We've seen from this report the nature of the threat that Russia poses to innocent individuals on British soil, as well as to Ukraine and to other countries across the world.
One of the key elements for this inquiry to consider was should security services have done more to protect Sergei Skripal. And while it found that further risk assessments should have taken place, its chair said the only measures that would have kept him safe from attack would have been completely changing his identity and ending all contact with his family, something he not only didn't want to do, but that would have been disproportionate at the time given the known risk. Lord Hughes concluded it wasn't unreasonable to assess that there wasn't a significant risk of assassination in 2018, saying that unlike Alexander Litvinenko, a former spy who fled and campaigned energetically against Russia before being poisoned, Skripal hadn't defected, had already been punished by Russia with 5 years in prison and had been pardoned. The family's lawyer disputes this finding.
That there was a proven record of the Russian state assassinating those who they didn't like, disapproved of, particularly those who betrayed and so on. As far as one can tell from the report, there weren't any precautions taken. Why? Because they didn't think it was a risk. Or rather, they thought it was a risk, but not a big enough risk. And I think members of the public will find this rather difficult to consume and analyse.
Instead, the inquiry's chair said the attack was a public demonstration of state power for both domestic and international audiences by a Russia with an increasing risk appetite, one that had seen it shoot down a Malaysia Airlines passenger flight and annex Crimea in Ukraine, a foreshadow of what was to come. Today, as Dawn's family grieve and with no one brought to account over her death, President Putin, on a state visit to India, was embraced once again with open arms on the world stage.
Well, one person who knows all too well what it's like to lose a loved one to Russian poison on British soil is Marina Litvinenko, whose husband, as you heard, was poisoned in London. I spoke to her earlier and began by asking if she thinks his death, 12 years before Sergei Skripal's, was a warning the West failed to heed.
We can't say it's enough until we know what would be next movement. What we do know, Putin has a different rules of games. It doesn't mean we need to search agents who've been professionally trained in Russia. It might be even British citizens who've been just hired to commit some kind of threat of people who's exiled in Russia, or maybe politicians. This is all changed.
And so when you look at the dance that Putin is leading over Ukraine, and it seems in many ways as if Donald Trump is dancing to his tune, how do you, who've suffered so much from Putin, how do you view that?
Of course, for me, it's very damaging. I'm really difficult for me to watch every time Putin's face when he looked like he is a winner. He again in the center of discussion. It's all what Putin needs. He needs attention.
Do you think Putin will be embarrassed by this report today? Will it cause him any discomfort at all?
I would like to remind you when he made a comment about Dawn Sturgess as about homeless, as about like rubbish person, and her death was just like a nothing. It's exactly what Putin thinks about Russian people too, when they're dying in Ukraine. They're not calculated how many Russians died. He doesn't care. And when this was saying morality, responsibility of Putin, what does it mean? I just believe after what happened of my husband inquiry, and everybody say highly likely, they just hated what British justice used this word, highly likely Putin was behind of this crime.
You mean him being publicly blamed will feel shameful to him?
He will not feel shame at all.
But he won't like it. He won't like the fact that the finger has been pointed at him in no uncertain terms.
I just sometimes think he doesn't care. Really, he doesn't care.
Just finally, could what happened to your husband happen again now? What happened to the Skripals? Could it happen now on British soil again?
It's difficult to predict because I don't want it. I don't want it. This is different stage of this war of Russia against European countries and against UK.
And the unpredictability of it is in itself destabilizing.
Yes, and only things it makes to make a change, not us. Again, it's not involvement of any international or European community. Of course, Russia state must change itself, but it started only after war in Ukraine would be stopped.
Marina Litvinenko, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, I also spoke to former British Ambassador Lord Peter Ricketts, who was Britain's first national security advisor. I asked if he would describe the attack on Sergei Skripal as an act of war on UK soil.
Well, it was certainly a hostile act. It was a botched operation as well and showed incredible recklessness and disregard for human life.
Why are you pulling your punches, though? I mean, are we still not standing up to Putin in the way that we should be?
Well, I was just hesitating to say war because, I think there are legal definitions of that. But Russia is a hostile state. We've seen it now for 20 years. There have been people killed like Mr. Berezovsky and now the awful Skripal poisoning. Those are actually intended as attacks on Russians in the UK. I think in a way we've moved on beyond that now because we've got the Russians employing their sort of dirty hybrid tactics against British infrastructure, British interests much more directly.
Clearly the responsibility for this lies with Putin, but wasn't there a colossal failure by the British state, by the security services, in failing to identify Sergei Skripal as a likely target?
I don't think that's quite fair. It's easy to say that with hindsight. Skripal was low profile. He wasn't, as far as I know, acting against the Russian state. And who knows exactly where this came from in the Russian system. Yeah, ideally it could have been foreseen, but it wasn't. I don't think we should blame the security services. And we've now got to get even more vigilant about what the Russians may be up to.
Do you think there's any chance this report will galvanise people around the UK, but also Europe, and just to really face up to the threat from Putin? When you look at the response from the government today, sanctions, summoning the ambassador, do we still lack teeth in our dealings with Putin?
Well, as I say, I think that in a way the Russian threat has moved on. I mean, what they're now looking to do is snoop around our shores, perhaps cut the cables bringing the internet to the UK. There have been unexplained fires in arms factories. There have been these drone overflights in Europe. There's a whole series of things they're rolling out one by one. And in each case, we have to find the best reaction to it.
When you read this report and digest it, how do you now view the way Donald Trump has treated Vladimir Putin over the last few weeks and months?
He's always been intrigued by Putin. He's been attracted by the idea of business deals in Russia. But this should be a sobering wake-up call. I hope it'll be read in America to show you've got to be very, very cautious. And the one thing he understands is power. And so putting real pressure on Putin to get the war in Ukraine over, to stop these dirty tricks in NATO countries, is the thing that he will understand. And the more power, the more pressure that the Americans can operate on him, the better.
And looking to the future, we should really have realised what Putin was like back in 2006 when he poisoned Alexander Litvinenko. Is this going to keep on happening as long as Putin is in power?
Well, yes, we should have realised then. We should have realised when he attacked Georgia in 2008. But there can be no doubt at all that Putin's hostility to us is settled. It's not going to change. And the only way to deal with it is to work to be stronger ourselves, keep the Americans engaged, and show him he can't win with the dirty tricks he's playing.
So hybrid war, if not something more overt, for the foreseeable future?
It's hybrid war. I mean, I do not see him launching an all-out attack on NATO countries. He's already got huge problems bogged down in Ukraine. He knows the strength of NATO. He has, in his strange way, respected it. There haven't been military incidents between NATO and Russia. So NATO's strength is something that has its effect on him. The stronger we can make NATO, the more we can keep the Americans involved, the better. But hybrid war, yes, cyber attacks, all that we've got to expect, and we've got to be vigilant, and we've got to toughen up for it.
Lord Ricketts, thanks very much.